The use of child soldiers in armed conflicts is a harrowing violation of human rights. One of the starkest examples is the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam LTTE, also known as the Tamil Tigers, whose systematic recruitment of children during Sri Lanka's Civil War 1983-2009 drew widespread international condemnation. The LTTE's military apparatus was notorious not only for its battlefield tactics and use of suicide bombers, but also for the institutionalized deployment of children in combat. From the 1980s onward, Tamil children, some as young as 9, were forcibly recruited using intimidation, threats, and abductions. Human Rights Watch reported that at least 3,516 children were recruited between the 2002 ceasefire and 2004, with UNICEF estimating the actual number to be even higher. Children were often kidnapped from their homes at night or while walking to school. Families who resisted faced violent retribution, including assaults and detention. One of the most chilling aspects of LTTE operations was the so-called Baby Brigade, which deployed children in mass frontal assaults. During the 1991 Elephant Pass operation, an estimated 550 LTTE fighters, many of them children, were killed. Children as young as 10 were used as assassins and were issued cyanide capsules to swallow in case of capture. Their training was brutal. Those who showed exhaustion or attempted escape were beaten, with some reportedly dying from punishment. Despite mounting international pressure and public pledges to end child recruitment, the LTTE continued to forcibly enlist children, even orphan survivors of the 2004 tsunami. In 2004, Amnesty International reported that the LTTE increasingly resorted to threats and violence to bolster its ranks. Families who resisted had been beaten with wooden sticks or had their houses set on fire, the organization said. Human Rights Watch also condemned the practice, stating that the LTTE has violated its obligations under international law by recruiting children into its forces and by having children directly participate in hostilities. One of the most haunting examples was the formation of the Sarasu Puli Leopard Brigade, a combat unit made up almost entirely of orphaned or kidnapped Tamil children. These children were subjected to intense indoctrination and rigorous military training before being sent into frontline combat roles. Escape was nearly impossible. Disobedience often resulted in brutal punishment or execution. Under international humanitarian law, recruiting and using children under the age of 15 in armed conflict is a war crime. The Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC, explicitly criminalizes such actions. Although Sri Lanka is not a party to the Rome Statute, the norms of customary international law still apply, and the UN has consistently condemned the LTTE's practices as violations of international law. The Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary-General for Children and Armed Conflict recognizes that children must never be used in warfare. Their recruitment is considered a grave violation of their rights and constitutes a war crime under international law. Throughout the conflict, UNICEF and human rights organizations, such as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, documented these abuses and worked tirelessly to rescue and rehabilitate child soldiers. UNICEF negotiated with the LTTE leadership on multiple occasions, seeking commitments to end recruitment. In 2003, the LTTE publicly pledged to stop child recruitment, yet reports of continued abductions persisted into the final years of the war. Rehabilitation efforts included psychological counseling, vocational training, and attempts to reunite children with their families. However, due to the trauma and social stigma they faced, many former child soldiers struggled to reintegrate into society. The full scale of LTTE's child recruitment remains uncertain. Only rough estimates exist of how many Tamil children were abducted, how many died during training or combat, how many were injured, or how many were coerced into suicide missions using cyanide capsules. There is also limited documentation on how many were turned into suicide bombers or were trained by female LTTE cadres tasked specifically with instructing child recruits. The LTTE was designated a terrorist organization by Sri Lanka in 1978, India in 1992, the United States in 1997, and the European Union in 2006. It was among the first rebel groups to be widely banned internationally, in part due to its recruitment of children. While other militant groups, such as the Lord's Resistance Army (LRA) in Uganda, the Revolutionary United Front (RUF) in Sierra Leone, and the Islamic State's Cubs of the Caliphate in Iraq and Syria, also employed child soldiers. What set the LTTE apart was the scale and systematic nature of its recruitment, particularly during the 1990s and 2000s. This drew intense scrutiny from international human rights organizations, including in landmark reports by Human Rights Watch 2004 and UNICEF. The LTTE's use of child soldiers in frontline combat, suicide bombings, guerrilla warfare, and even as human shields remains one of the most disturbing aspects of the Sri Lankan conflict. Globally, these practices highlighted the urgent need for stronger international legal protections. The United Nations 2000 Optional Protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Sri Lanka ratified, established 18 as the minimum age for participation in armed groups and classified recruitment of children under 15 as a war crime. The LTTE's violations helped galvanize global efforts to enforce these standards. Though the LTTE was militarily defeated in May 2009, the question of accountability remains unresolved. Numerous international investigations, including those by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights (OHCHR), have detailed the group's war crimes, including the widespread use of children in combat. Although the LTTE often portrayed itself as progressive on issues like caste, critics argue that it disproportionately exploited vulnerable populations in northern and eastern Sri Lanka, particularly poor, lower caste, and marginalized Tamil children, coercing them into committing atrocities. It is also reported that some sections of the Tamil diaspora in countries such as Switzerland, Canada, Australia, the UK, the US, and parts of Scandinavia continue to support or fund this banned terrorist group. While many of these groups are quick to condemn the Sri Lankan military for alleged human rights violations, they often overlook the LTTE's extensive use of child soldiers, a practice that not only breached international law, but also devastated Tamil communities from within. The LTTE's defeat in 2009 marked a turning point. Approximately 594 former child soldiers, 364 boys, and 230 girls surrendered to the Sri Lankan military. Under then-President Mahinda Rajapaksa, the government prioritized rehabilitation, offering presidential pardons and reintegration programs focusing on education and psychological support. At the end of the war, President Rajapaksa stated, "Our hearts are not vicious. We will not prosecute children," and instructed that they be given the education long denied to them. Children who once held guns were finally given pens and pencils by the Sri Lankan government, a symbolic and literal return to a childhood stolen by war.